This is the Cambridge Creative Writing Centre series of conversations with writers. We're excited to have you here. For anyone who doesn't know, today I'm in conversation with the writer Jill Dawson. Jill has written 10 novels and often speaks to creative writing students at ICE. She is founder of the Gold Dust Mentoring Scheme, and her latest novel is The Language of Birds, which has just appeared in paperback. Welcome, Jill. It's really nice to see you. So I went around the house collecting as many of your novels as I could find.
Oh gosh.
And I found a whole pile of them.
That's nice.
So the only one
I think you've got most of them there, haven't you?
I haven't got The Great Lover, but I know we've got it.
Okay.
Because you put a really nice inscription inside it. So the most recent one is The Language of Birds, which is a fantastic novel, and it makes me very happy every time I think of it because I read it on holiday this time last year. So I have a very, very happy associations with it.
Good.
I've been watching you on Twitter in lockdown, and you seem to be very upbeat and things. You seem to have been very productive in lockdown. Is that the case, or are you just putting on a brave face?
No, I am productive. I feel almost embarrassed that, in fact, I do like my own company. Most of my days are spent alone anyway, so it's not hugely different for me. So I think if you're not worried about, if you haven't got someone you're caring for or some health issue, then in fact, the great expanse of time, which is what I felt gifted, has been really, rather wonderful. And I've got into quite a good routine. And I've sort of just got on with a new novel, which has been quite exciting. So that's probably why I'm cheery. I think if you've got a routine, some discipline, some walks. And the other thing I keep thinking is that it could have happened at any point in our lives, we realise. And actually for me, this is the moment when my kids have just left home. So in fact, I was kind of both dreading and looking forward to this bit of freedom. So it's coincided. I think it's much, much tougher for people stuck at home with kids, or at different points in my life it would have been tougher for me, for sure.
Yeah. And are we allowed to know about the novel you're working on at the moment?
Well, I'm trying not for any it is a bit superstitious. I think it's the idea that if I talk it up, why will I write it? I have to write it because I become obsessed with it. So I try not to talk about it, but all I will say is it's set locally again. It's very much a fen novel, which is what I like to do. And that the research up until COVID really was going out into the places where it's set, and now the research is very book based, but that's fine.
So and I completely understand that, because in a way, if you talk about it, it's a kind of a form of creation, isn't it? And I think there's less need to write it down, really. So I get that.
I think it's exactly the same. If you start talking about it, you're using up all that thinking and excitement, and in a way that should go into your work.
So I wondered if your writing has changed in this lockdown. Do you think you're writing in a different way, or your style has changed in any sense?
The only thing I think is significantly different is I'm really glad I'm not writing a contemporary novel. So I think that's what would have been hard, because everyone would wonder, by the time their novel came out, 2021 or something, what will things be like? And so for me, the fact it was already set long ago in the past allows me to just be lost in another era. So in that regard, it's sort of taking me away from the contemporary problems and situation, and I think that's been helpful. Whether it's altered is really interesting. I think time might show that, because I don't normally get such a long unbroken stretch, and it's quite nice to be absorbed. So I'm hoping that has a positive effect, but who knows, really.
It's interesting you should say, because I was looking, I spend a lot of time on Twitter these days, but Sue Tedden, who we both know, is writing her first novel, having been a very successful writer for radio and TV. And she has said she finds it really odd to write intimate scenes now, because we are at a distance, and it seems really odd to write about people meeting in cafes and restaurants. Have you found that different, or has it made you think about those kind of scenes in a different way?
It hasn't happened in the writing, but it happens when I watch things on television and stuff like that. People just exchange a kiss when they meet, and you feel a little bit, have you washed your hands? So there is something going on, I think, where we've quickly become accustomed to it. But I guess my writing, the one I'm doing at the moment, has lots of big scenes with lots of people in. And in fact, that's quite a challenge for me. I often write intimate scenes. 1-to-1 is my preferred scene in a novel, a conversation between two people. And bigger scenes has always challenged me, although I do have to have them. So that's a shift, and I don't know where it's coming from. I don't always know where things are coming from.
Yes, yeah. And the language of birds. So during lockdown, you were due to go to Italy, weren't you? Because it was going to be published there. And I just wondered, because it's a very British book in a sense, isn't it? I mean, perhaps you could tell us a bit about it and how you feel about the thought of Italians reading it, because they must have different reference points for it.
Well, I don't speak any Italian, so you'll forgive my terrible pronunciation. Inutile delito, a pointless murder. I think that's the translation in Italy. So I'd had a lot of prior publicity because I was going to go to Rome, and I had all sorts of things set up, telly and, interviews, radio. And so I was getting a sense of what they were responding to. And interestingly, and I know you and I have spoken about biographical fiction or biography and fiction or fiction based on real stories, that kind of thing. And I kept getting the response that this was what was exciting for Italian readers, that this was a real story. Or that my work often looked at a real story and then sort of took off from there. And also the sort of domestic violence angle, I had a lot of interviews that asked me about that. And I think on the back of Elena Ferranti and her, quartet that looked at violence in Italian society, they've been very interested in me looking at violence in an aristocratic family and things to do with class. And so it is really interesting to get another culture's point of view, especially one I don't know very well.
Yes. So it's a book about Lord Lucan, isn't it? Essentially.
Well, how I've described it. So the nanny at the centre of the Lord Lucan case, Sandra Rivet, were very much forgotten. When I began this novel, she was at the forefront of my thinking, and I looked her up and I discovered a couple of facts about her, like she had 2 sons and she was in a psychiatric institution briefly. And then I quickly, because the Lucan case has been so well covered and there are other novels and lots of teleseries, I did want to sort of take off a bit from there, and I decided to sort of really make very significant changes. And so The Language of Birds is actually the story really of Mandy and Rosemary, these 2 young nannies who go off to be nannies in London, sort of country girls from the Fens. And they land in a very bad situation, particularly Mandy, with this lady in Lord Morven. And the details of the murder do absolutely echo the details of Sandra Rivet's murder. So I didn't really deviate there, but almost everything else is made up. And I always have this issue about what's made up and what isn't and where I'll go with it. And I've tried it and explored it in different ways. So this time it felt as if the starting point was very much this woman, this victim that we didn't know much about. And I would look a bit more at her life.
Yes, and I think that's one of my favourite reviews of it, picked that up, that for once we see the story from the victim's point of view.
Yeah.
It's got a great humanity to it, yeah.
Well, I'm pleased that people noticed that, but also the review that pleased me, or an early one that pleased me, is kind of the same thing that you said about reading it on holiday. And one of the reviews said it had a very joyous feel, and that rather than being about the death of Mandy, which is only a small part of the novel, I tried to make it about her life. And actually that pleased me, because I don't, I sort of think the trouble with being a victim of a very famous crime is you're almost a corpse or a plot device, forevermore. That's how you're remembered. And the life that you had isn't much known. And that's not hugely different from what I was trying to do in The Great Lover, the Rupert Brooke novel, where he's, in a way, better known for his death than for his life or his work. So I'm often looking at that reversal. And I mean, I think it is a problem you will know very well, and biographers also have, is that the death shapes the life, so we look backwards.
Yes.
But we do want our readers to engage with a character who doesn't know what's coming, doesn't know how their end will be.
Yeah.
So I had Mandy, I mean, it's not too much of a spoiler to say she falls in love. She goes to Annabelle's and clubs and a sort of a fantastic holiday on a Scottish island, and all sorts of adventures that she wouldn't otherwise have had. And I wanted to make it quite upbeat, I think. A young woman going to London, having the same opportunities men might have hoped for.
Yeah, no, and I think you definitely achieve that, because it's got a real sense of place as well, and of the time, and of excitement and freedom, and maybe taking a few risks, and that's fun. Yeah.
Great. Well, interestingly, I went to London about 10 years after the period I'm writing about. So Mandy went in about 74 and I went in 84. And although there would be quite a lot of differences, and I loved messing around with the sort of 70s backdrop, I did think the sense of adventure and really what I always loved about London was, having come from a small village, how anonymous it was. So you did feel you could misbehave because you know, your auntie or your mummy, grandma wasn't around the corner. So I wanted to give my girls that sense of freedom. And it was very interesting because it's a point of feminism where I think, you know, yes, say, for example, the pill was available, but not really for girls like Mandy and Rosemary, not where they came from, where they would have had to go to their family doctor. So I was sort of thinking, yes, the idea of the city and the country and what was possible, and what kind of freedoms there were. But as you say, also what risks and what dangers, and how that might be different.
So your Italian readers, would they have known about Lord Lucan, or is that completely new to them?
They did, as it happens. It seems that the case is so famous that it was known there, I suppose, by a certain generation, because it was 1974. And they certainly knew the sort of aristocratic man had murdered his nanny or been accused of it and then gone on the run. They knew that much. The bits of the story I found they didn't know was the bits that British readers often didn't know about the victim, the fact that she'd had children of her own, that she'd given up for adoption, or the fact that the other thing they didn't know was the fact that Lady Lucan, so Lady Catherine in my novel, had actually, you know, accused her husband before of violence, you know, sort of, well, he'd snatched the children once and things like that. So the idea is that actually it followed quite a classic domestic violence model. But back in the 70s, we didn't see it that way. Whereas I think what's really interesting is we're able to look at things a little bit differently and go, well, look, he had a track record. This seems, you know, more convincing than the idea of a mysterious outsider bursting into the house and murdering the nanny for no reason. So I kind of always want to play with the idea of how the narrative changes over time. You know, what we believe in one era and what we believe in another.
And that's very relevant now as well, isn't it, with the Black Lives Matters, and, you know, the idea
completely is.
Sharing
yes, and I sort of think it's the lens through which you look at things, is what's going on, what's your current awareness. But I think probably because of my interest in history, that was always my first love, having some humility about the sense that things change, you know, that, for instance, Me Too is a moment, but there will be another one, or there might be a backlash, or, you know, everything will change. It's never sort of static, which I think a novelist can have quite a lot of fun with if you enjoy that. So I kind of wanted to show, I'm sure Mandy had the same desires as any contemporary person or anyone of my era or now, but she had many more strictures and restrictions of what she could or couldn't do. I mean, even going to a pub by herself in London, I was looking at pictures of women in pubs, and they did exist, but with men, you know, and much fewer in number. And that might be a small freedom that women don't even know they've won, that they could sit in a pub with a glass of wine by themselves.
But it's a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting.
So why do you think you're drawn to the past and real people?
I know, I was thinking about the past one the other day, which was, am I ever going to write a kind of contemporary novel?
Yes.
And I wonder if it is simply the sense I have that what I want to think about is how things change in our viewing of things. And so you need a perspective. I mean, if I were to write about COVID now, I would need to know, how are we going to see it in 15 years? What will we make of the sort of things our government did, or the debates that we had, or the responses? It feels to me that the, you know, time passing gives a fantastic lens through which to look at things, and that's what I enjoy. So that, in a way, I don't even comment very much politically, if you see what I mean, for the same reason that I'm often thinking, not sure what I make of this yet. I'll wait and see. But as for real lives, I've thought a lot about that one. And all I can say is, well, I think I've said this lots of times, but my early desire when I was sort of in my, I suppose, my late 20s to be a therapist, because I wanted to, in a way, listen to people's stories and make sense of them. I feel as if my exploration of real lives is a continuation of that interest, is sort of simple facts like someone's loss of a parent or someone belonging to a particular social class. How does that play out in their lives? And it's not simple, and it's not at all, it's not quite the same as having a plot or a narrative and imposing it. I'll kill off a character at this point, or I'll have this happen, which is you as a novelist choosing. I quite like the constraint of having to explore something and realize, well, at this point, amazingly, she went and had another child, or something that you think wouldn't happen, and then trying to understand why or what that might say about your character. I find that more challenging and more interesting.
Yes, I can see that. And, as a non-fiction writer, I like that constraint as well. I think it's really creative to have to work within those boundaries of what was possible at the time.
And also, as a sort of, I know you will understand this, the sort of pleasure I get from research where facts that don't seem related suddenly connect somehow. I mean, currently that's exactly what my pleasure is to find something out about the family I'm writing about, which is, I will say, it's a real family, it's a real story again. And then finding their name in a history book in some other reference and seeing how it connects. I think that just is a joy. And imposing my own storyline has never felt like that, interestingly. So I understand that lots of novelists, that's what they want to do, but it's not where it's coming from with me. It's sort of looking at things and turning them upside down. I mean, if I give as an example, say the one you mentioned at the start, The Great Lover, the Rupert Brooke one. I had read lots and lots of biographies, but I'd also come across a new cache of letters that had come to light at the British Library. So they had not been included. And so I kept thinking, what if people had known about this? It was some letters and a memoir from a young woman who'd known Rupert Brooke. And so you sort of think, so there's even all these years later, 100 years later, new evidence coming to light that shows someone differently. And it feels to me it's an ever-evolving story. And if you've just sort of set it in stone and decided this is someone that is, to me, it's not nearly as exciting as keep digging things up and going, oh, now we know this and maybe that.
But when you finish a novel, is that it? Or do these people live on in your heads? And if something new emerged, would you want to go back to it?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because at the moment we're talking about TV and film possibilities for 2 of my novels. So I'm not allowed to say very much, but you know how that conversation goes, gets very exciting, and you start picturing things differently, like a whole scene. So I think they live on a little bit like that, where I suddenly see them in a different form. But actually, unfortunately, it's quite a strange feeling. Once something's done, it's done, and I don't feel very attached to it. I'm much more excited and attached to whatever I'm currently working on. And even, I would say, and probably a lot of writers share this feeling, although I do it and enjoy doing it, I think sometimes sort of having to talk about a novel that you finished a year or 2 ago feels quite dredging it up because my energies move somewhere else.
Sure. What about where you live? So it's quite a remote part of East Anglia, and East Anglia does play quite a big part in lots of books you've written about. Has it helped you through this difficult period, and how important when you're looking for a story is it that it's got a connection with East Anglia?
Well, it's interesting you started by saying you'd seen a little bit of my cheery life on Twitter, and I think I've shown people a little bit more of where I live, because there's been nothing else to do. You know what I mean? As in, we haven't been going to book launches or events. And actually, a big part of my life has been spent in this area, which is a village, sort of north of Ely, very rural indeed. And so every day on the walk I go on, I see birds, and currently I'm looking for an otter, because my son has told me where there's a sort of been an otter. He can see all the signs of it, and I haven't actually seen it, I have to say, but I'm always going there hoping this river that has been a part of my life for 20 years. So I think it's not that surprising. It's seeped into my writing because it's so much a part of my imaginative and daily life. And I'd never thought I was a sort of country person, even though I grew up in Yorkshire. I loved living in London. But what I think I am is someone who's very affected by her environment. So I did set 2 novels in a council estate in Hackney, which is where I lived for 11 years. Those were my first 2 novels. So that absolutely affected my work. And I think it's not that surprising that East Anglia, which always feels to me much further away from London than it actually is, an hour and a bit on the train. But to many people, it's a very unknown county, especially I think where we are, Cambridgeshire, the Fens.
Yes.
People might know Norwich maybe, or Norfolk, and they think of waterland, but that's not quite right for where we are.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's endlessly fascinating. There's always more to discover. And actually, the combination for me now, walking, used to be swimming, but in lockdown, can't do so much swimming. I've done a tiny bit in the river, but I haven't been to the swimming pool, of course. So walking has taken its place, and walking and writing to me go together. So I'm thinking about my novel as I'm walking, and I feel that this sort of sky, landscape, birds will find its way into the novel again, definitely.
Yes. So when you go for a walk, do you think, oh, I've got a knotty problem with my writing, I'm going to chew over that as I walk along?
Yeah. I must admit, I often talk to myself because there's nobody here. I'm not going to bump into anyone. And I start saying things like, well, what would she do at that point? Or what is, and I'm asking myself questions. But also the other thing is, the language of birds has quite a lot of birds mentioned in it.
Yes.
And in The Great Lover, which the Rupert Brooke one, we have bees. And one of my novels has snails, the Highsmith one. So I always put creatures and animals into my work. It's just sort of feels very natural. So interestingly, on the walks that I've been doing this time, it's been hares because it's been March and there seems to be a lot of them.
And they're quite mystical, aren't they, hares?
They are. And every time I go out, I seem to see one. So it feels as if I'm learning about them. So I go back and read up on them,
Yeah. Are you wearing your necklace with the seahorse on it, or is it another?
This one is a starfish. I have indeed got a seahorse one. I've got whale, bee, you name it. I've got a necklace with everything on. Today it's a starfish. I don't know why.
So, but do you think it's important to have like a charm when you're writing and thinking?
Yes, I mean, you can't sort of easily see my desk because even if I turn this around, it looks such a mess. But I often have things around. I have kind of things so that when I pause when I'm typing and pick something up, I feel as if, that might be quite inspiring. So I find myself fiddling with a necklace, or fiddling with something.
Yeah.
And I think it really helps.
Yeah. And when do you allow anyone else to read what you're writing?
Well, I get to the end of a decent draft before I do.
Yeah.
Just occasionally, I might halfway through say to my husband, can I read you some of it? Because I might start thinking, this has just been going on in my head for, a year and somebody else needs to hear it. But increasingly, more and more, I'm quite cautious about showing it. I think that comes over time, doesn't it?
Yes.
Probably all get a bit like that. As in, I don't really need, beyond my husband, my editor, my agent, whatever, that's quite a lot of opinions. So I feel as if I don't need lots of other ones that will bewilder me as much as help me.
And what kind of feedback does he give you?
Well, he's great. I mean, I think there's usually a terrible danger in showing work to partners, and it's not something that we'd necessarily recommend. But the difference here is he and I read the same kind of books.
Right.
And he reads a lot of fiction. He reads a lot of fiction by women. It's not as if he doesn't know the genre I'm working in. So I think the reason I trust his opinion is because of the books that we've discussed and got very excited by, and very rarely disagreed, I think, on a novel. So I'm sort of know that he knows what I'm about and is interested in the same things. Or sometimes I might give him a steer and say, I think I remember this in Lucky Bunny, that because it was set in London in the 50s and in a quite difficult Cray twins kind of world to conjure up, when he first read it, I can remember him commenting on that. And then I suddenly realized I didn't need that. That wasn't, you know, I'm that's fine as far as I'm concerned. That's what I'm happy with. What I needed him to say was whether he could tell this voice of Queenie and whether it kind of came through. So these days, I've learned to slightly steer him and say things like, do you think Mandy and Rosemary sound different enough?
Right.
Rather than, you know, just read and give me your response. Because I think sometimes then people feel obliged to give a response on something you're not perhaps even that bothered about. So that idea, a bit of a steer, I think helps, because I suddenly realise what it is I do need an outside opinion of. And he's tough. Meredith is tough. So I have rewritten things after his comments, and then I would show them to my editor. Interestingly, she's also tough and had the same editor for 20 years. I'm very lucky.
That's a luxury, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah. But she's brilliant, and interestingly, you know, she will say quite similar things, it feels like, and Meredith will sometimes say, well, I said that, but you didn't listen. Oh yeah, now Carol said.
Yes.
And they're big things. It's not trivial things. Again, with creative writing students, I often think they imagine that by the time you're on your 10th novel, you don't need any input. Not at all. You know, if she were to say, I really don't think this character's working, or I don't think that you've created an environment we can believe in, you know, I'd go back to the drawing board. I'd have to. And she does say big things sometimes.
Yes. So is there any one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring writer just starting out?
This is a very simple quote, I think. It might be Margaret Atwood, but I've been saying this for years, and I think this sums up what we're all trying to do, if you like. And it's this, not maybe as easy as it sounds. She simply says, tell your own story the only way you know. And it's the second part, which is how you find your form, that is interesting. And of course, it doesn't mean tell about autobiographical story necessarily. Tell the story you want to tell the only way you know. Maybe I've even misquoted it, but I've been saying that for years because I find that one really useful.
Yes. I remember, as you know, my husband is also a writer, and I remember giving him feedback and saying, this is a long time ago, well, Graham Greene would have written it like this, and he got really cross and said, well, I'm not ... Graham Greene. And that's a fair point, really, because he should be writing in his own voice.
That's it. It's interesting, isn't it? Well, I'm glad to hear you still had those sort of... We had them at the beginning when we shared work, and I think you learn, don't you, how to be helpful to one another.
Yes.
I mean, writer friends as well, close writer friends, where we might discuss things, not necessarily show the work anymore, but discuss something, you know, a really knotty problem, or almost what to work on next, those kind of issues.
No, sometimes Jim will come in and tell me his problem. I will say nothing, and he'll say, that was so helpful, thank you, and just leave.
Brilliant. Well, there's something you've learned. I never say nothing. Meredith showed me a piece of writing, and I do feel I was a bit harsh. So anyway,
Brilliant. That's been so interesting to talk to you. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. We hope you can join us again for the next one. You'll find more information about the books we've mentioned and the courses we run in the description box below. Thank you, Jill Dawson.